This week's reading was 1 Kings 1 through 22. Nobody could be here. After the open rolls, Mrs. Braz will ask the questions, and I'll do my best to answer them and talk about 1 Kings 1 through 22. What did the author have to say about this week's reading?
Have you ever noticed how the atmosphere feels when there's a storm on the horizon? The wind begins to blow, but it's still warm outside. Soon, the clouds cover the sun, and the wind shifts and becomes a little stronger. To someone inexperienced, these changes may not seem significant, but if you've lived for a while, you can tell a storm is about to arrive because you've seen these changes before. We see this kind of feeling in the atmosphere around the prophet Elijah in 1 Kings 18, figuratively and literally. Elijah had prophesied that no rain would fall for 3 years to prove to the wicked king Ahab and other idol worshippers that Yahweh, a biblical name for God, often angelicized as Jehovah, was the true and living God, not Baal or any of the other false gods being worshipped. In this passage, those 3 years were complete, and Elijah and Ahab were in a confrontation, in a competition against the prophets of Baal at Mount Carmel. God allowed Elijah to perform miracles and call down the fire from heaven. We see Elijah succeed in killing all the prophets of Baal. And then Elijah says to King Ahab, "Go and get you something good to eat, because I hear the rain coming." Rain after 3 years of drought would be the miracle that confirmed who the true God was. Elijah was certain about this. It wasn't about what he felt, it was about what he heard. We have to always guard our ears, because it is through the ear that we hear the word of the Lord for our lives. Romans 10:17 says, "So then the faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God." And in Kings, what Elijah heard was an abundance of rain. Then Ahab went to get something to eat and to drink, but Elijah went to pray. I believe that he prayed for God to manifest what he heard so strongly in his spirit. And that's a lesson for us all. Sometimes God will drop something in your spirit that doesn't seem possible, but you sense it so strongly you can't explain it. But you just know that something is on the horizon. Therefore, we must pray for God to manifest what He's already spoken in our spirits. You might not know when or how it's coming to pass, but I encourage you to continue in prayer, trusting that the drought is almost over and God is soon to bring forth manifestation.
Yeah, I enjoyed Elijah's confidence while confronting everyone about the false gods of, speak up, maybe they're asleep and things of that nature. I thought it was cool, amusing and cool.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes, especially, in the modern age, can't you don't often see Christians portrayed as cool. And I was like, man, that's definitely an example of like the confidence in God is what showed his level of awesomeness. What is the first question?
What areas of your life are seemingly in a season of drought?
I don't enjoy bringing up the same things over and over because it feels redundant or pointless. But I am still in the moment, in the time of unknown when it comes to occupational advancement, whether it be, or even appreciation. Because if I knew that I was valued or appreciated, it would be for me to sustain in the moment, wait for the rain to fall and know that the growth is coming. But when I don't know how the people see me, it makes it hard to sustain in the same place that you've been for so long.
Absolutely.
And and just struggle with all of the unknown. I will say this, the prayer group at work helps to just on the and without it I probably would not have stayed as long as I did, because while yes I do have people who care about me and show that I have value, without the company stepping up and demonstrating where my place is with them, it definitely makes it hard to see myself remaining. All of their advancements are so vast that there's like a lost chasm of time where it's like, well, you expect me to stay this long to get that little, and it's just it's a struggle. It's hard to know if there is staying, because especially when other organizations are willing to go above in monetary value, man, it makes it hard to see that the rain is coming for growth. And to even change the subject from that, when it comes to Gamble Comics, I often wonder where is the breaking point for input of both ideas and time and money. I have put in all that I can, the investment, or like I don't want to give up, obviously. And I've pushed so far forward to try and grow in multiple ways, to spend less to try and make it so that I have to earn less to get to a place of success. But even with that, it's like, at what point do you realize that it's not going to happen? And now, what I often say is the guaranteed path to failure is stop trying. But again, how many years, how much money, how much time? Like, is it 10 years till the overnight success? Like, is it 10 years since the website launched? 10 years since the first book came out? What is the moment where you're like, oh, it's not going to happen? And here's the thing: is I just don't have an answer to the question.
Well, I feel like at that point, that's when God steps in, and you have to give those thoughts and feelings to God, and He always finds a way no matter what. So
Right.
you leave it in His hands.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I was just going over a different drought
I get it.
perspective.
I was just throwing out.
No, it's that's something I enjoy, is that you have the positive perspective when I struggle with it. But yeah, just there's definitely some luxury, the hindsight's 2020 and all that concept, because it's easy to look back and say, oh, this was the correct answer or that was the mistake. But when you're in the moment or moving forward, it's harder to know which
Yeah, because we don't
path
know the
is
future.
exactly.
God knows the future, but I didn't want to know.
Exactly. What is question?
What impossible thing have you been sensing in your spirit? With the job stuff that it's the unknown of what decision is going to be made.
Of course,
That's
but
definitely
the impossible thing that it said sensing is the question.
yeah. You're sensing is
Though the funny thing is, I don't consider it a sensing. I consider it a realization. And I actually had this conversation, I think it was yesterday. There are 3 definitive moments, and probably more if I tried. But there are 3 definitive moments without thinking that come up when it comes to drawing that make me smile / I find amusing and a little frustrating with myself. But when I was sent to Fort Irwin, California, in the Mojave Desert, the first day I arrived, I told a sergeant that I felt unwell, and he's like, "Oh, you just don't want to be here." I was like, "Well, I'm not saying I want to be here. Yeah, I'm not gonna get me to lie and, oh, I'm so happy to be here, but something's wrong." And so he sends me to the medical center, and the medic says, "Oh, what's wrong?" And I'm like, "Something's wrong. I don't know." They're like, "Oh, you're probably just dehydrated. Go back and leave me alone," basically. And I say, "I feel worse." And they're like, "You just don't want to be here. Go to talk to the medics." And so I go, and they're like, "Oh, you're probably just dehydrated. Give me an IV." A couple more days pass, same thing happens. This time, the sergeant who sent me to the medical center is beginning to actually suspect something's wrong, but the medics are actually mad that I'm back. They said, "You know what? I'm taking you to the hospital on the base." I'm like, "Okay, good. Why didn't we do this, 5 days ago?" But anyway, we go there. They draw my blood, do some other stuff too, but they draw my blood and they say, "Oh, you have strep throat, bronchitis, and mono. You can't stay here because we don't want you to get other people sick while we're training for this upcoming deployment." And so when they send me back to Hawaii, it's fun because the first time that I ever, first, last, and probably only time, unless I become successful, have ever flown first class, I was very unwell. But because I was in uniform, had nothing else to wear. But back to Hawaii, I was not allowed to do my job because they didn't want me to get people sick. So I got tasked to do something I don't normally do, which was take inventory of the food at the dining facility to help staff sergeants order food. But that wasn't an all-day task. It didn't take me 6 hours, it didn't take me 8 hours. It was like very limited in like the amount of time that it couldn't be out there when they were cooking anyway. So I had a lot of downtime in that period. That's even when I was allowed to come back to work. Like there was a hot period where I didn't even go to work because I was unwell. But when I was able to go back to work and they didn't let me cook, I drew a lot. And when I was drawing, a staff sergeant walked up and she said, "Why aren't you doing this?" And I said, "What?" She's like, "You're good at that. Why aren't you doing this?" And I said, "Oh, I don't know. I mean, how am I going to make money at this?" And she's like, "I don't know, but you should be doing that." I was like, "Cool. Let me know how I can make money at this and maybe I'll do that." And time passes. I get out of the Army and I go to which math class? We'll call it algebra for the sake of argument. But I don't really care. Like and I'm not saying it in a mean way. If you love math, then great, but I just didn't care. And every time the professor, he wanted us to hand in our notes of how we got to where we were in the conclusion of the math problem. But because I didn't care, every page that I handed in had a drawing on it. I don't know, Spider-Man, Hulk, didn't matter, Superman, whatever. Thank you for being here at Mr. Super Oz. This video is going out, and this channel only exists because I, Oz, founded Gamble Comics, which first release was Everlasting Survivors, a 68-page graphic novel called All Day Long. Available now. Follow the link in the description that will take you to gamblecomics.com. While there, you can get hats, shirts, posters, much, much more, but most importantly, the story itself. And college professor, like the first time he found it, oh, that put a smile on his face, right? But after the end of the class, he was like, "Are you an art major?" And I said, "No." He's like, "Why not? You should pursue this." And I'm like, "How am I gonna make money at that?" And so it's funny. And as you know, and I'm sure that, if you've watched the channel more than a handful of times. The third occasion you were actually there for, but, and I've mentioned on the show, or the channel, after going to the Cincinnati Comic Expo in 2014, I met up with Jeff Hicks in 2015, rolled out 4 11x17 drawings, and he said, "Oh, don't pay me, you can do this." And I said, "But I have the money, I'm going to pay you. You know what I want the characters to look like." He's like, "I can see that you can do this, you should just do it." I was like, "But I'm going to pay you." He's like, "All right, fine, I'm not going to fight you to not pay me, but just know you can do it." And then, 10 years later, from that point, we were sitting at it was 9 years later. We were sitting at a table together at Cincinnati Comic Expo again, and he was digitally inking over top of a drawing that I had done to prove the point that all I needed was a good inker to bring the drawings I'm capable of doing to life. And so, like I said, while it's not what was the way that the writer put it?
Sensing your spirit.
Yeah, it's not a thing I was sensing, but it was just a realization that I had from thinking back on the life that I've lived. There have been multiple, I don't know if I would call them nudges or just experiences or whatever the case may be, where it's just times where it's like, "Oh, why are you not listening, dummy?" I said the thing that, because it didn't make any sense to him. How can this happen and happen and happen? And I just keep ignoring it. I said, well, I can remember when I was growing up, my father would think that what I was doing was a waste of time because the only thing he understood was what he understood, whether it be hunting or fishing or butchering or farming. He couldn't wrap his mind around the things I was capable of or understand how that they could be advantageous or positive. And with that, I think that's why that I dismissed it / thought it would equal nothing, because it was the way that things were presented all throughout my youth. It's complicated, so.
Yeah, and here's the thing though, when hearing that story, it makes me think of, well, God has given you the gifts of art and drawing and being creative.
Well, and here's the other thing, just being able to see it. Like, it's one thing to be able to draw a picture, but to also see the story play out, I think is an entirely additional piece of the puzzle. Because there are artists that I know who say, "Oh, I can't envision the way the story plays out. I just know how to draw the picture." And there are artists in the world who are better artists than me. Don't get me wrong; they're better than me, but they can do one piece and it's a finished piece. Whereas what I feel like I am capable of and have always had in my mind is A to B to C and the story playing out. And if you can know the beats of the story and then subsequently know how to show people the beats of the story, then it is a way to bring them into the narrative. What is the third question?
Why is it so impossible? Do you really believe that God can and will perform the work?
Nothing. Why is it so impossible? That's funny. So, I think many times God will give you the capability of executing what you want. Do you want to be a chef? Then God will have given you the talents to become a chef,
Skills.
right? But it isn't as if you can want to be a chef and have the skills and then do nothing and then it happens. Like, that's not how it works. You have to, think of it in the way of Jesus healing, right?
Yeah.
The blind. When Jesus healed the blind man, he had to go wash the mud off his face. It's, to me, the reason that it's the reason for the repeat and the repeat and the repeat of why aren't you doing this? Because it's the slap in the face of, like, you have it and you're not using it. What is wrong with you? go wash the mud out of your eyes.
And that's just, I feel like that's the stubborn nature of us humans.
Of course.
We want to do our own thing, but God keeps nudging us in the way that He believes we would do our best.
Well, the crazy thing is, like, it's not even that I don't want this. I want it. I'm just scared of failing.
Well,
is I think a lot of what kept me from pursuing.
I feel as if that from your past growing up, it was always negative, 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 and nothing positive with the gifts that God has given you.
Well, it's
so you've always thought you weren't good enough.
Well, the problem isn't that it was all negative, right? It wasn't that it was all negative, because I think the problem is that I have too often unconsciously placed my father's feelings in my thoughts of God, because, and I do think it was an unconscious thing, because my mom was positive, my sister was positive enough, like I had plenty of family who believed in me, but because my father on earth didn't see the value in what I was capable of, it just felt like I must go a different direction. And no other direction ever really fit, I guess maybe is the best way to put it. And by fit, I mean was the proper way of demonstrating or illustrating, to make it amusing, what I was or am capable of. And I think that reality is what makes it so painful. The idea that I unintentionally or without thought put negativity on such a high place. Because had I just dismissed the negativity and embraced the positivity, perhaps things could have been entirely different. But that's the crazy part about life, is that you just it takes time to become aware of what both the positives and the negatives are. Because had I known at 8 years old that the negativity that was being said was going to hold me back for the next 30 plus years. And that's the thing, though. At that age, at that time, you don't even understand what 30 is. Like, even at 18, I didn't understand how fast 20 years would fly by.
Right.
Because looking back at my earliest time in the Army, I couldn't conceive of giving 20 years to the Army. But then 20 years has passed, and it seems like the blink of an eye.
Yeah.
And the same goes with, it doesn't have to be a job, it can be a relationship. No different than that, because when you first start out together, you don't, maybe you do think of, oh, it'll be long term, but I know myself personally, in the beginning, I didn't think, oh, 12 years from now, it'll be whatever. I was like, I don't even think about 12, 10, 12, 13 years, whatever type thing down the road. It just, you're in the moment.
Yeah.
And then when you look back, you're like, oh, wow, that was nothing. I mean, it was everything and nothing all at the same time, time-wise, because that's the crazy nature of, the way that we understand time.
So it says, further thoughts for the week. After Elijah prays, he tells his servant to go look toward the sea. The servant comes back and says he didn't see anything. Elijah keeps sending him back until, on the 7th time, his servant sees a little cloud about the size of a man's hand rising from the sea. Elijah is persistent in his faith. He doesn't allow 1, 2, or 6 bad reports to discourage him. He stands on what God said, and he doesn't waver. We won't always see immediate manifestation, But that doesn't mean God isn't going to do what he said. We must be persistent in our faith, knowing that God said it, God said it, and it's got to come to pass.
That's a good ending because while I couldn't come up with 6 examples, I only came up with 3. It's the clear nature of the consistency that makes it so apparent. And also, just because you prayed for something 6 times or 70 times and it hasn't come doesn't mean that it won't happen, which is another beautiful thing about the way that the writer put it, because so often we want it, and we want it now, whatever it is, whether it's a return on investment when it comes to comics, or the knowledge that the employer sees your value. But let's be real, we, or I in this case, want these things immediately. Whereas when we look back on so many experiences in life, it took the actual experience compounding to make it make sense. And let's say that the first thing I ever wrote was put out. Well, it wouldn't have been as good if I hadn't kept going and kept going. And so
Exactly.
I think that's my major takeaway from this week's reading, is that you have to not just do the work because, that's important, but you also have to keep the faith that, when you pray for whatever it is that you have or want, that it is in accordance with God's will, and know that just because you don't get the answer that you seek immediately doesn't mean that God isn't listening and that it's not going to happen.
Amen.
I appreciate your help.
Yeah.